My name is Steve. Welcome back to my shop. This video is part 2 of my S50 Stuart steam engine rebuild or repair. And in this video we're going to silver solder the section that I milled out in the last video to remove the broken tap, and that's so that I can drill the third mounting hole. And I'm also going to fill and solder the head bolt holes on the head with the gland nut in it. That was oriented in the incorrect direction, and the steam port would have interfered with one of the mounting bolts. So we're going to repair that. We're going to re-drill the mounting screw, and we're going to re-drill the casting for the gland nut head. So let's get started. Off camera, I set up to silver solder a piece into the cylinder block casting. And this is the materials that I'm using. It's the Stay Silv, and it's 45% silver solder. I want to use this because this is a structural part of the block. I'll take you over where I have off camera. I finished cleaning up the area that I cut the broken tap out of. I cleaned that up in the milling machine, and I have placed a small piece of brass in the hole. So I'll take you over there now. This is the brass piece that I put in, and I used the flux. I put the flux in the hole and then slid the piece in, rotated it to make sure the flux was all around it. The torch that I'm using is a Burns-O-Matic torch for MAP gas. There it goes. And that's it. The silver solder sucked right in around the plug. That should take care of it. We'll let it cool down and we'll come back and take a look at it. I cleaned the casting up on the wire wheel, and there's the repair. The solder flowed in all around that piece. I could see it suck right in there. So now I'll just machine that off, and then we'll mount it and re-drill a new hole. But before I do that, I am going to fill in these holes, because if you notice, this hole right here lines up with where I have to drill the steam port through to here. When that was made originally, they drilled it wrong. So what I've done is I've cleaned out all these holes. They're number 256, and I tapped them out. And now I'm going to thread some 256 screws in them with flux. I'm using a product called Ruby Flux. It's a liquid flux, and I'm going to put each of the screws in with that, and I'm going to heat this up and solder these in with soft solder. It's called silver bearing soft solder. Normal electrical solder is 60-40, This is a non-lead solder, and it has a small percentage of silver in it. It's got a little higher temperature than electrical solder, the 6040, and it's also a little bit stronger. But it's a lot lower heat than what it requires to do silver soldering. You can actually use this with a soldering iron. However, because of the size of the casting, I'll be using the torch. So let me get that set up, and I'll bring you over when we're ready to solder that up. Okay, I've heated up the housing. There it goes. Sucking right down along the sides of the screws. That side's a little cold yet. I'll heat this side up just a little bit more. There it goes. Get the heat just right, and it pulls it right down around the threads. That should do it. The one in the front here built up a little bit higher, but it did suck down along the sides. Let me turn it around and show you. That one is ideal. That one went right down nice and smooth. There's a little contamination on the surface, but I think that once I cut them off and machine that, it'll be nice and flat. And I got solder, I believe I have soldered in all around them. So we'll let that cool down and clip the screws off. Okay, I clipped the screws off and rough sanded the end flat. Now I'm putting it in on the mandrel that I made specifically for this purpose. I'll tighten it up. And I'm going to take a light cut on the end just to clean it up. That's just what I wanted. All of the screws are soldered in place, and then I'll have to re-drill it, of course, for the new bolt pattern. So the next thing I'm going to do is take it off of here and clean up the area that we silver soldered. I think I'll do that with by hand with a file off camera. I took and cleaned up the casting. This is the corner where I silver soldered the piece in, and I filed that down. I filed both sides and then hit them with some Scotch-Brite. Pretty happy with that. So the next thing I've got to do is to now drill a hole for the mount. So I'm going to screw this down to the casting, and then we'll mark it for the new hole. Yeah, that's good. So what I'm going to do is screw it down in place with the two screws that have been drilled and tapped. Okay, that's screwed on there, and it looks pretty well aligned. Let me grab a straight edge here. I use a ruler as a straight edge to make sure that it's aligned with the... Now I'm going to use that as a guide. I'm going to take it over to the drill press and just make a little pip on there. Then I'll take it off and drill it. The drill size for the body, which is actually the hole that's drilled in the casting, is a number 44. So I'm using a number 44 to line it up, and I'm just going to make a pip mark on the casting itself. Okay, now I'm going to take the casting off and drill it for the 256 thread. The drill size for the 256 is a number 50. Okay, I've got my tap guide in there. I'm going to put the drill in the hole, kind of line it up a little bit. There's only one problem with this little drill press, and that there's no spindle lock on it. So I can't, I've got to hold pressure down on it. I think I've got the tap started straight enough that I can now just freehand it. See, this is a 256 tap, so I'm being very, very gentle with it. I'm not even reaching to the outside of the tap handle. I'm strictly using two fingers on the inside, and I think I've got it. Let's go put it on the base and see if it fits. Okay, so we've got 3 mounting screws in there now. It appears to be in line. Pretty happy with that. There's actually still a little bit of movement in it for adjustment if it needs to be. That's perfect there. That's just fine. Okay, the next step is to re-drill the casting for the head bolts. This is the head that's got the gland nut in it, and so what I'm going to do, I'm going to put that on the casting. I'll take the casting off of the base, and I'm going to put this on the casting, and we'll mark one. I'm going to drill it, put a screw in it, and then we'll go around and put the rest of them in. So I'll bring you back after I take it back off the base. Okay, here is the head with the gland nut in it. And I need to line that up so that the steam port, which will be drilled right there, is in between the two head bolts. So what I'm going to do is take and get a drill that fits the bolt hole, and I'm going to go through and just make a pip mark on the casting. Then I'll put the tap drill in it. I'll tap it and put one bolt in to hold this in place, and then I'll go around and match the rest of them to it. Okay, I mounted the casting in my little drill press vise, and I've got the head oriented in the correct direction. I've got a drill that just fits into the hole, and I'm going to go through and just make a pip mark with it. Now I'm going to swap over and put the tap drill in. Okay, I've got the drill in. I'm going to tap that hole and I'll bolt the head on, and then we can go around and do the rest of them. Okay, I had to regroup on that one a little bit. The head bolts for this that came with the in the casting are actually 6BA. So I re-drilled it and tapped it for 6BA, and I put one bolt in to hold the head in place, and now I'll go around and mark the rest of the locations for the bolts. Now that I've got a center in each one of them, I'll put the tap drill in, and I'll go through and drill the tap drill. Now there it is. All the bolts are in. They're oriented correctly so that I can drill the steam passage in there. So that's going to wrap up this video. In part 3, we'll drill the steam passages and see what other trouble I can get myself into. So I'll see you in the next video.